Hey, this is Unit Bacteria. Unit Bacteria. This is Unit 5. Bacteria through plants. It's kind of a weird name for a unit, but we're just going to go through bacteria and all the things up until plants, and then we're going to talk about plants. And then we're going to talk about animals in this whole unit. Let's do this. So, first thing we're going to look at is just the 6 kingdoms that we're going to go through. There's all kinds of different lists like this, but for our purposes, this is the list. We're going to look at bacteria. First of all, we're going to look at archaea. We're going to have one slide for that kingdom. Then we're going to talk about bacteria for the rest of this particular section. Protists, fungi, plants, and then animals last. They're all wearing a crown because they're all kings. Archaea first. What are archaea? These are bacteria-like organisms. There's a lot of ways that you could distinguish them from bacteria. They have a different cell wall chemistry. We're not really going to get into all that. One of the things that separates archaea from other organisms is that they live in very harsh environments. Here's a picture of some sort of hot spring, Yellowstone. It's like Morning Glory hot spring or something along those lines. And it's like 160 degrees, which is like really hot, right? You can't get in that, but the bacteria love it. And see, that's why it's all yellow and nice looking. And so these are bacteria that live in harsh environments, hot springs, deep sea vents, salt flats, all kinds of places. We're going to be spending our time talking about eubacteria. Prefix eu, remember, means true. These are true bacteria. Different than archaebacteria, a lot more diversity. Archaebacteria means first, and so these guys came first. Bacteria came next, regular eubacteria. And so we're going to get into them. Let's talk about their metabolism. Bacteria can metabolize things lots of different ways. And so you can see here this kind of flow chart that shows you a couple things. So the two things that you need to understand here is where do they get their carbon from? Meaning, do they get their carbon from the atmosphere, able to fix it themselves, or do they have to eat other things, right? And so that's the concept that's the concept autotroph versus heterotroph. And then there is photo, where they get their energy from, and chemo, where they get their energy from. So they're either getting their energy from light or chemicals, and they're either getting their carbon from fixing it themselves or from eating other organisms. So let's look at the 4 different types. Photoautotrophs, what are they doing? They're getting energy from light, right? And they are fixing carbon using light. That is like photosynthesis, right? Photoautotroph, an example would be a plant. There are bacteria that are photoautotrophs as well. Photoheterotroph. This is a little weird one. So, a photoheterotroph is an organism that gets energy from the sun, is able to absorb the sun's energy and do things with it, but needs to eat other organisms in order to get carbon. I'm assuming there's bacteria that kind of fit into this mold. I've heard that there's wasps that actually fit into this mold, weirdly. Chemoautotrophs. They get their energy from chemicals. I'm going to show you a process in just a second what that would mean. And they're autotrophs so that they can fix carbon, just like plants, and get their CO2, or get their carbon from inorganic sources like CO2. And then chemoheterotroph, energy from other organisms, or from other chemicals. And then heterotroph, meaning that they get carbon from other organisms. This would be like us. We are chemoheterotrophs, and a lot of bacteria are as well. Moving on. Chemosynthesis is the process that chemoautotrophs use. And so it's like photosynthesis, it's just chemicals. Don't really know how else to explain it. In places where the sun doesn't shine, chemosynthesis is necessary to keep those ecosystems floating. Same idea, right? Same idea of making glucose, but just using a different source of energy. All right, bacteria reproduction. They reproduce using this process called binary fission. Binary fission is really just the DNA replicating and then cytokinesis. Remember all those steps, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, all that stuff left out because there's no nucleus, right? We don't need a division of the nucleus if we don't have one. And so the DNA replicates, cytokinesis happens, very quick. Binary fission, the name of that is literally split in two, is what that word means. And here's conjugation. Conjugation is not reproduction in the truest sense, in that after the process is finished, you don't have an offspring. However, there is an exchange of DNA. So bacteria can actually kind of connect to one another, as you can see here in this picture, and one of the bacteria is able to like share a portion of its DNA with the other one, and this gives these bacteria lots of variability, lots of adaptability. There's some different shapes for bacteria. Here they are. They're the bacillus shape. These are like the Mike and Ike candies that you get in the movie theater. They're rod shaped. You could say Mike and Ike shaped if you wanted to. That wouldn't count off. Rod shaped is probably more specific. Coccus is the spherical shape, and Spirillus, spiral shaped. A lot of times you'll see this on the end of a word, like Staphylococcus bacteria is an example. The word staph just has to do with the grouping of the bacteria, and of course the tail end, the coccus, is the shape of the bacteria. So there's some bacterial shapes. Bacteria have two different kinds of cell walls. They're gram-positive or gram-negative. Gram-positive, you can see there, nice thick cell wall. That purple is the cell wall, and then a cell membrane underneath that, whereas gram-negative have a real thin cell wall. However, they have two cell membranes, and so this makes them a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for, sturdy, able to resist antibiotics and different things. And so a lot of times the gram-negative bacteria are some of the most dangerous kinds of bacteria, like E. coli and Salmonella, and some of the other ones are gram-negative bacteria. So let's talk about the role of bacteria in the ecosystem. I'm going to list three different roles of the bacteria in the ecosystem. First is that bacteria are decomposers. What do we mean by decomposers? A decomposer is an organism that is able to break down dead material into its most basic parts. There are other organisms that eat dead things, like earthworms are a great example, but they don't break it down. They get it ready to be decomposed, but decomposition is literally taking it apart, right? It's building that Lego set and then taking apart every single part into its most basic parts. Why would it do that? So that the ecosystem can reuse those nutrients again. It's taking these dead leaves and sticks and trees, breaking them back down, making soil again so that the new trees can have that. A tree takes a lot of nutrients out of the ecosystem, right? And they'll be out of the ecosystem for years. So when that tree dies, the bacteria come in, break down that tree, return it to the ecosystem so that that ecosystem can use those nutrients again. Another example of something that bacteria are used for is in the human body, as our normal flora is the term that we're going to use. There's some other terms that are associated with this, but these are the bacteria that live inside of us. I once heard that there are more bacteria living in us than there are cells in our body, which is kind of crazy. You can see there all those neat numbers, tons of different, 316 million genes, 5,000 different species of bacteria living inside of us or on our skin or in us or something, right? And what do? Well, they help to maintain our normals. That's what that normal flora has to do with the things that live in an area. Normal means just normal. And so these are the bacteria that inhabit our body. They're important for things like digestion, vitamin production, cleaning, all these different things that go on, like eating dead cells and that sort of thing. Bacteria, they're doing it. Fascinating subject. You should study that. We don't have time to go into it. And then nitrogen fixation. We know what carbon fixation is, right? Taking unusable carbon, making it usable. So nitrogen fixation is the same thing. We can't breathe in nitrogen. 70% of the atmosphere is nitrogen, but we can't breathe it in and use it. And so there are bacteria that actually fix nitrogen to make it usable. And it's part of the nitrogen cycle. We're not going to get into this a whole lot, but bacteria are necessary in order to take nitrogen, put it into ecosystems. Nitrogen, of course, is necessary to make things like DNA and proteins, which, those are pretty important. So bacteria, three important roles: decomposers, normal flora, nitrogen fixation.